Yes, team, how are we? Welcome back to another episode of the High Performance Coach podcast. Today, we have the absolute pleasure and privilege of welcoming a very special human in my life. He has been my best friend for the last 10 or so years. Was the best man at my wedding last year, which was almost a year to the day. Actually, this time last year, I was dressed in a Mr. Motivator outfit in the middle of the Mediterranean somewhere. And today we're going to be recording a podcast because I think Ryan is going to bring so much gold, so much value, and has now shifted and evolved himself monumentally into the financial world, and now is really supporting so many of our coaches just with regards to their own wealth management. And we wanted to be able to bring you as much value as possible. So Ryan, aka Quinny, how are you, mate? Welcome to the High Performance Coach podcast.
Thank you very much for letting me come along.
Dude, I'm going to start with, I'd normally make it about you, but actually I'm going to make this about me initially. And I want to go back to that time that we lived together a few years ago, and you came home from a football camp, and I was sat on the floor in the living room with a nutrition book, and you were like, what the fuck are you doing?
What's going on here? Yeah, I think that was probably the time, and again we tell this story a couple of times to people now, but I think that was probably the time that I felt you were different. There was something different about you, and I wanted to make sure I was always going to hang about with you, type thing. Because, like you said, I was it was summer, so university was off. I was working for the SFA at the time doing football coaching locally, so it was about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. I came back and you were sitting on the living room floor with your legs crossed and a nutrition book writing out formulas on a bit of paper, and I was just like, what are you doing, mate? It's summer, like go out and enjoy yourself. And he's like, no, I need to just do these last couple of formulas or whatever you were doing. But it was great to see, and it was one of those ones where, like I said, that I kind of knew that you were different and you were going to go places type of thing, which was, we can laugh about it now, but at the time I thought you were an absolute weirdo.
I still am an absolute weirdo. And one big thing that I reminisce on quite a lot was, I still remember the day whereby we sat and we were having a conversation. I think we'd just actually been I think we're actually hungover and we'd been for a walk to go and grab some food, and we came back, and then you're like, mate, this fitness thing, he's like, you need to make it a thing. He's like, there's so much here. It's like there's something that you need to build. And right now, like, there's so many people that are asking you so many questions. You're creating content on social media, and right now you're like, just know that this needs to be like something so much bigger, and you've got the potential and the opportunity. And that was like really the catalyst. And I think so often you talk about like the evolution of like somebody's journey, and nobody is a self-made man or person, and it's about realizing that so often we just stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's actually the people around you that have so much confidence, belief, and backing and trust in you, and just support you regardless of whether you understood it or not at that time. And I think that's so incredibly important. And mate, you've been such an integral part of like my progress, my development, and such a huge kind of like driving force behind my growth. So it's absolutely incredible to have the opportunity to obviously sit here and now have this conversation more about you and where you are and your evolution, which has been absolutely huge. So let's get into that, and let's understand Ryan in a little bit more depth and detail. What is it we need to know and understand about Quinny in order for us to be able to appreciate now why you do what you do in the wealth management side?
Yeah, so I think, like you say, now that moving into the kind of wealth management side, I think going back to, you know, the start when you're younger, school age type thing, I think I could always see it coming to this point. And I think, you know, a couple of years ago I kind of had a reflection on why have I got to this point, and you know, Joe's doing the fitness and you know some of the other guys are doing something totally different. What is it why did I enjoy this? And I think it's funny because I think it comes back, or it started with the school age type stuff. When I was at school, I found, reflecting on that, I didn't have a lot of control in my life. Again, grew up, still have ADHD, so school was a struggle for me. Putting me in a room, you know, a small room with a chalkboard and an old git, you know, with a bit of chalk writing on the board, and surrounding me with 30 of my pals isn't good for someone with ADHD. So I struggled quite a bit in school, and most of the times in school it was Ryan, go there, Ryan, you have to sit there, Ryan, go. I never had any control, you know, day to day, and I didn't realise it at the time. But then when my mum introduced the concept of money to me, and you know, I used to have to make the bed, I used to have to open the curtains, take the dishes out the dishwasher, and I get 50p a day. And I think that was the first time in my life that I had control over something. you know, because I didn't have it in my environment, but I could have it with this thing, money. And at first I used to get, £2.50, £3 a week, and I thought I was the king of the street, and I used to run down to the local shop, the wee shop at the bottom of the street with the kids and buy everyone sweeties. And that's what you do, you earn and you spend. And my mum was saying, well, and again at the time, you know, 10, 11, you were young, even younger, PlayStation was the thing, so you want to buy PlayStation games, and I'd say to my mum, I want a new game. She said, well, you need to earn it. And she said, you have to save this money that we get. So I'm like, right, well, it's going to take me 3 weeks or 2 weeks to get a £10 to buy a game. So what I used to do at the start is I used to go, right, I've got £10, I'm going down to the computer shop and I'm going to buy a game, but it was always the 10, the new games were 30 quid, and I only had a tenner, so I had to buy them from the second-hand section. So I had loads of second-hand games, and half the time I didn't play them. So then I realised, delayed gratification a wee bit. Instead of 2 weeks, wait a month, have, £20, £30, I can buy a new game. So I think that's where this control element of money came from, and earn and spend, and then going forward, earn, keep and grow it type thing came in. So I think it was definitely that school environment and the control thing that started the money for me. But then coming forward, probably coming into the university age, I think you get caught up a wee bit in the society thing of having money and spending whatever is bad. It's your grandparents and parents sometimes say, oh well, money doesn't make you happy, and I get that. Money doesn't make you happy, but it can help, create choice, create freedom. And I think during the university you kind of get caught up in that that kind of culture, if you want to call it, and it's probably a British culture of having money's bad. It seemed to be greedy and all the rest of it. So I probably fell away from it at that point, and we were just working and we were at uni anyway. And then it probably came back into my life through one of our good friends, through the property investing side of things. So then that's evolved into now looking at wealth management as a whole. And
can you remember that moment that came into play, and that exact day that you had an aha light bulb moment, of what did that now look like for you in terms of the next steps into the property side?
Yeah, totally. I think, like I say, from where the money kind of mindset came from for me, and getting it through my mum, I always had that concept of, I had at a very young age the concept of, I'm giving up my time to earn this money. So, firstly it was opening the curtains and every day, and then it was very quickly moved into about 11 or 12. I got the paper round for the local, three streets around my area. But that was a Tuesday, a Wednesday of getting the papers and putting all those crappy leaflets inside. So that would take all my Tuesday and Wednesday night, and then Thursday and Friday I'd deliver them. So it was kind of 4 days I was doing something to do with this paper round. So when I got the money, a wee bit more money from that, I didn't want to just spend it on rubbish because it took so long to get it. So I always had, again, I come back to maybe the control. I had a bank account and I could control the money that comes in and out of it, and it sits there, and I can kind of look at it in that sense, but it's there. So I think then when the property thing came around, it was that aha moment of, wait, so this money that I've got sitting here that I've worked hard for, I can put it into something else and it's not going anywhere, but that money is going to potentially grow, and while it's growing, I'm getting rent. So I think it was that kind of, this money I've earned, it's going nowhere, it's growing, and I'm getting something, now for it. So, and like I say, it was one of our friends, we were all there on a night out in Stirling, a reunion night out, and I think we were all half pissed and talking to our friend Craig about it. And I was like, hold on, so somebody else pays the mortgage and you get a bit of money from it, and he just went, that's the beauty of it, Quinny, that's how it works. And I was like, that was that kind of moment of, right, this money that I've got, instead of just spending it down the shops and on clothes, the concept of investing is what I need to use this for. And that's where my time to get the money to then invest, it made sense to me.
And how's that evolved now in terms of the property side? What were some of the biggest lessons you've been able to take from that? And then how's that evolved now into the wealth management stuff? Because obviously you weren't doing the wealth management stuff when you started the property stuff. You were working in schools and basically working alongside active schools.
Sports coordinating.
So how did that evolve from the property stuff then into the wealth management stuff? Yeah,
so I think, like, just going back on the kind of sports, like, so my, most of my 20s at uni, what I studied and stuff was sports coaching and sports coordinating. So that's what I'd done during my 20s as I was doing this. Mid 20s I think was when the property side started coming in. But again, even from early 20s to kind of late, as well as working full time. I set up, a football business, so I was coaching kids every night, every weekend, to the point where I only really had depending on how it worked, if I had a birthday party on the Sunday to do for some of the kids, we had classes on the Saturday, then every night I would only sometimes get a Monday night off working. And that went on for a couple of years, and I got to the point where, going back to the time value of money, I'm wasting all my time. Yeah, there's money's growing, and going back to the childhood, that's what I wanted, to have money and then to put it into things, but I was wasting so much time. So I think even that, and then when COVID came, the classes started dipping, and I couldn't sell the business, which was a big reason maybe going into wealth management as well. The classes just dwindled and stopped, but what it did is it freed up time to put into the property side of things. And yes, there's still a lot of time goes into property, but not as much as every single night and every single weekend that it was with the kids. So I think when the property side started coming in, I think that's when my mindset changed to working smarter, not harder, a wee bit. That came into play. So yeah, and then the property, that was probably from mid-20s up until now, which has let me move into the wealth management space. But I think what I found probably in the last couple of years is that property is only one asset. You invest in assets, and assets grow, and they can also, assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take money out your pocket type thing. A car's a liability, assets are things like property. And I think realising that property was only one asset of a number of different things that you can invest in, I think changed my mindset to knowing that I now had to be a bit more diversified with investing. Probably selfishly a little bit for me to start with. I wanted to know what else I should be investing in, and that transpired into the financial advice and wealth management. But then finding out what else there is to play, I really want to make sure that that everybody I speak to, all my clients and everyone else, has the same understanding and education to know what they can do with their money. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big thing.
I think other thing you haven't mentioned was that it wasn't just the adventure football. You also had the RQ Man business, which is obviously selling wallets. And I at the time got a call up. I obviously had the hands. And my face wasn't in it. It's just my hands were in it. Yeah. And I was the model. I had the hand model for RQ Man. But I still have the wallet to this day. But again, I think the great thing about that was let's just fuck about and find out. It was for you just trialing different things, and actually just now having these little kind of side passions that you were doing. And whilst obviously some worked incredibly well, some you learned so much from. It was everything was just a stepping stone to actually where you are right now. And it was just putting yourself in a position, in a space where you were just trialing and erroring and just learning about marketing. You were learning about obviously budgeting. You're learning about forecasting. You're learning about everything that actually had to go on in different domains, whether that was now a service-based business, or whether that was now obviously a product-based business, which I think has also now allowed you to kind of gain a greater degree of understanding, because it's just that experience, which is incredible. So if we look at what are some of the biggest challenges that you now see when it comes to understanding money, what are some of the kind of basic principles that you would now look at initially when and if you were to speak to somebody that's Ryan, I'm trying to understand obviously money in more depth and more detail, and what's best to now do with this moving forward to be able to look after my future? What would be some of the key considerations that you would start with and you would now look at?
I think one thing I always say to my clients, and if I'm talking to anybody new for the first time, is we want to get over certain concepts to you when it comes to finances and money. And I think the biggest thing most people want, and we'll talk about the principles that are behind this, but is financial clarity. A lot of people just want to have a bit more clarity and a bit more understanding around what money is and what it can do for you. Again, like you kind of mentioned there, I think for me, I'd done most of my 20s was trial and error with things to see how it works and how much I need. And again, even for me, looking back, making mistakes with money, again, going through the property cycle and being so hyper focused on that for a while, any money I had, I hated it in the bank account because I can put it into a property, I can put it into another asset that's working for me. So I used to, have bare minimum in my bank accounts until a couple of years ago. I think it was January 2020 or 2021. I got a huge tax bill because, unfortunately, again, another reason why I wanted to have a blended, holistic approach with money is that property is heavily taxed, which I wasn't totally aware. So I got a massive tax bill. I managed to flood my bathroom by breaking my toilet, and my car's filter, and I smacked into my neighbour's wing mirror, and I smashed the car up. So it all happened in the same month, and I had no money to pay for any of this. So I was like, what am I doing? Like, I've got, I think at the time, 6 or 7 properties. I've got all these properties, and I can't even pay a tax bill, and I can't even get my car fixed. What am I doing wrong here? To the point where I think my biggest financial lesson, or the darkest day in my finances, was going to ask my retired dad if I could have some of the money that he stashed under his bed to pay my tax bill. So I think for me, I was like, something's got to change. And again, your question there about the concepts and the principles, I think the first thing a lot of people need to get with their money is having an emergency fund. Having a bit of money that's in a different bank account that just sits there for these rainy days. And then you can, and it's what I would consider a kind of survival part of money, survival of your finances. That's there just to survive. And then once we've got these little concepts in place, principles, we can then thrive, and we can invest, and we can put money into different things, and we can kind of, like you say, fuck about with things a little bit, because we know we've got this security money there. So I think first and foremost is just getting a little bit of clarity and understanding, and having a little bit put to the side.
Mm-hmm. Do you think when you speak to a lot of clients, obviously varying, I think it'd be interesting to know, like varying obviously age groups. Yeah. Now there's a lot of it's not actually the logical, it's more the emotional, it's more the psychology of money and their relationship with that, based upon even what you've communicated, and I can share as well, like the stories and the experiences that you've now obviously had with the upbringing. And do you feel as though that's quite often a bit of a challenge because of the beliefs that they have surrounding that?
Massive. I think, again, what I would say to a lot of people, when like I sit and talk to people, is I try and find out, we do what's called a kind of life plan, because I want to find out where you're at just now in your life, where you're living, your lifestyle, your career, your business, but also what your understanding of money is and what your upbringing of that was. Because like I said, I figured out a bit of self-awareness of where it came from for me. So I think a lot of people have this earn and spend mindset. Well, that's the way I was growing up, and that's the way my mum and dad would use money. As soon as they got it, they just spent it. So that's what you do. And other people are obviously slightly different, where they maybe have more of a safety and security around, and I probably had more of this, a safety and security around hoarding money and keeping it there, because if I've got it there, then I'm secure, or I'm safe, or I'm financially okay. And I think it's making sure people are aware of where their mindset is with the money, to then move on to invest and why we invest. And again, a big thing about investing is how much risk you're willing to take. So you need to make sure that you're figuring out clients' risk profiles correctly, and a lot of that comes from usually upbringing, either mum or dad, granddad, or even around, like I say, schooling. You get those kind of initial concepts, I would say, of money.
So if you had a coach now that was, and let's go down more like the self-employed route, in terms of like, have like a fitness professional, which is exactly what this podcast is for, and they were like, right, okay, Ryan, I'm now basically building and starting to like run my business, and now obviously I'm looking at, right, okay, what is it I now want to be able to start to do with this money? Like, first and foremost, you obviously spoke about the emergency fund. Then what would be the next steps that you would now like have and or put in place that would be just considerations that would obviously now need to be made, because obviously, a bit like everything's going to now be specific and tailored, and this is now not going to be like, this is the advice you need to apply. This is simply this is just some principles based upon your expertise. But emergency fund, then what are the other components you would then obviously consider and explore when communicating with a coach who was looking to become more aware and more strategic with how they were kind of financially planning for their future?
Yeah, so again, the point you kind of made there as well, with financial advice, and quite rightly, it's a heavily regulated industry, and so it should be. So I think before I give or can give financial advice to someone, I need to know their situation. So when someone says, what should I do with this money, it's that kind of cliched answer of, it depends. It depends, I don't know about you. So what I sometimes say to people is, well, this is more financial guidance. I'm these are options that you can do, but I don't know what one's right for you until we sit down. But in terms of a kind of financial plan, and talking about it as having like a robust financial plan, it's first and foremost, like you say, is the emergency fund needs to be there. Then a lot of again, this is where people can differ, but I'll add this in. Then it's looking at paying off any debts you have. And when we say debts, we're not talking about mortgage, or things like that, which is probably the biggest debt you'll have, but it's paying off your asset, which is your house. We're talking about, personal loans you took out to do the garden or to pay you want to make sure you're either paying them off, and you also want to make sure you're looking at what interest rate you're paying it back at. So I think that's a big one that I think some people miss. If you can get personal loans and debt onto interest-free payback, then that's better. Because again, for us to then go and invest or put these other principles in place, these thriving principles, that's going to create, and that's a big thing I say to a lot of clients as well, I'm not here to make you rich in a way, we're here to create long-term sustainable wealth. And I think the big part is sustainable. But to do that, but we need to be having a plan in place for any debt you have that you're paying off, car loans, stuff for the house, things like that. So that's probably a wee side caveat, but after your emergency fund, what we're looking to do after that, and it's very important, is to protect what we currently have. And that's through your insurance. We've got home insurance, we've got car insurance, but we need to have our own insurance. That's a big thing, because something happens to you, and we've had a conversation, and we're investing money here, and we've got money over here in emergency funds and savings and all this. If something happens to you and you don't have any insurance in place, where do you take the money from to pay for the time you're off work or you're sick, whatever? It's probably coming from your investments, or it's coming from your savings. Now, they're there for a reason. We invest for a long time. It's not a short-term thing, investing. We want to build it up and create wealth, create assets. So if we're just going to pull the money out of our investing in 3 years' time because we're sick, what was the point of investing in the first place? Because all those returns and the growth that we're looking for is not there anymore, because we've just used the money, we've took it out. So I think protection ourselves is big. And the way I sometimes frame it to clients is that if you had a magic money machine sitting on the coffee table, and every month it spat out £5,000. At the end of every month you just got £5,000 out of this machine. Would you insure it? And damn right you would insure it. Well, that's you. You're that magic money machine, and you're the one that's making it. So you've got to make sure that you're protected. So I would say that's protection and emergency fund is that survival part, just keeping protected what we currently have and what we've currently built. And then on top of that, we look at our investing. Mm-hmm. And that's when we look, now that we've paid off debts and we've got emergency funds and we're protected, the next bit of our money is when we look to invest. And that's when we're getting clients away from the earn and spend mindset to an earn, keep and grow mindset. Still spend and still live your life. And again, another kind of phrase I use with a lot of clients is you learn from the past, which I think we both have through business and doing things. You learn from the past, you live in the now, but you plan for the future. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hitting that nail on the head that, and if we're doing these things, then we're any life event that happens, there's a plan for it. Yeah. We've got money there, we've got money, we're all right. So I would say that. Yeah.
I think the big thing that I'm hearing is, and again, it's the same with, if I relate this, to the coaching world. It's like getting in shape and staying in shape require two completely different systems. Getting money, keeping money requires two completely different systems. Getting in a relationship, staying in a relationship requires two completely different systems. So therefore, the strategies and principles that you now use to obviously make money are going to be different to the strategies and principles that you now need then obviously to be able to then keep money. And it's just about now having that kind of mentality, and then also the frameworks, the principles in place. And I think the education and the awareness, because I know for me, it's like, I remember the first time that I really had to sit down with the accountant, obviously 10 years ago or so. And it's like, they're just using language and words that I had no clue about. I had no financial education or awareness whatsoever. I was fortunate enough that my stepdad is a financial advisor as well, so he was able to obviously support and help me and give me obviously that degree of understanding initially. Yeah. But I think the big challenge that we see is that actually it's the same. It comes back down to the education. It's like actually not having the awareness and or the understanding or who to trust or where to go or what to do. And therefore, as a byproduct, we then don't necessarily then put these things in place. Or again, like if I look at myself, I'm like, well, I'm 25 years old, so I don't have to worry about this right now, and I can worry about this later down the line. But actually, it's not about how much, it's about when. Yeah. You kind of start to put these things in place, and it's that longer term game that you then start to consider, and it's more the discipline and the relationship you build with that, which I think was something you said to me a couple of weeks ago, was like, it's more about the discipline, the relationship that you have with actually doing the behavior of doing the thing rather than necessarily like getting to the thing.
Yeah, I think the big thing as well, like you say, going back to kind of financial concepts, and what I mentioned there was the financial clarity side of things, which is great. And I think the big one that most people hear, and I get the term, but it can be very ambiguous and it means different things to different people, is financial freedom. And we want to take it back a couple of steps even from that. And I think once we get financial clarity and understanding about education and why we do things, you know, we're all very, I would say, good at it because we're told to do it on making money. You know, we all know how to make it. You get a job, you start a business, you know, invest whatever it is to make it, but it's then keeping it and growing it. And I think another big concept that I always try and get over to clients as well is financial stability and security. And the way, again, I kind of articulate that point is, it's like a table. It has 4 legs to keep it secure and stable. A car has 4 wheels, so it can drive it stable. We want to be similar in terms of having 4, whether we want to call it income streams, or 4 ways where there's money there. You know, so we've got one table leg would be your job or your business. So you've got an income coming in there. You've got another table leg that is your protection, so the insurance, because if something happens to you, there's money coming in there. Another table leg would be your investing. So I'm now putting money into things that's going to make its own money. So I'm over here in this table leg working and in my business and doing my job, but this table leg's making its own money for me. The way I sometimes describe it to business owners, it's like having an extra employee. But that employee over there that's making its own money, you don't have to chase out of bed in the morning, it's not going to turn up late, and it's not, do you know what I mean? You're not going to have to discipline and reprimand them, they're not going to speak bad to customers. It's just doing its own thing over there, and it's working for you. And then another table leg would be, and I think this is a big thing that we don't, not that we don't talk about enough, but when we talk about investing, this is the boring side of things that boring old farts do, and that's the retirement, that's the pension. And a lot of people I speak to, you know, very successful business owners are like, oh, I don't need one of them. But then when we actually go into the detail of this 4th table leg, they go, shit, I didn't realise how lucrative and how good this will be for me, my family, and my financial plan. Mm-hmm. So I think having that stability, I think, is probably more than financial freedom and whatever that actually means. I think most people are just looking for financial stability.
Mm-hmm. I heard a little thing a while ago that I've always had in my mind, which I think has been so incredibly powerful for me, which was, and it didn't take this from me, this came from somebody else, was like, how much money do I need to live life? How much money do I need to love life? And how much money do I need for later life? And that gave me a great understanding of, okay, how much money do I now need to live just day to day? How much money do I need to love my life, do the things that I want to do, go on the holidays and go out for the dinners and everything that I now enjoy based upon my values? And then how much money do I now need for kind of like later life? And that's been a concept that I've now kind of been able to take. It's really simple and easy for me to understand. I've been able to then reflect upon like my spending behavior, and then understand, right, okay, this is now exactly what these now look like, and then obviously can strategically plan as necessary. But if you were to look at it from like a budgeting perspective for fitness professionals, coaches, anybody in the self-employed kind of world, yeah, what would be some basic considerations that they would now make, or any things that you could give them in terms of tactics or strategies that may be quite good for them to be able to understand how to budget more effectively? And I'm also aware that it's going to be individual dependent.
Yeah, again, very much so individual dependent, but I think just in a basic kind of concepts when it comes to the budget, or even just financial planning in general, and something we've maybe not touched on yet, it's a big part of the meetings and how, you know, I talk to my clients is why they're doing it. And again, I know it's a very cliched thing, what's your why? But it's really important when it comes to financial planning, because if you don't know why you're doing things, if it's for a specific life event, if it's for to go on a couple more holidays a year, if it's, you know, you're investing for 10, 12, 15 years because you want the kids when they're 18 or 21 to have a deposit for a first house or buy their first car, there really does need to be a kind of why we're doing it. Because then when it comes to budgeting, or it comes to, you know, it's a Thursday night and you're tired and you're about to go into the Just Eat app and buy another takeaway, you go, no, because that money's, there's a reason I'm keeping this money over here and I'm investing it. So I think in terms of that, there always needs to be the why. And sometimes, again, I'm speaking to people, you know, young professionals that maybe just starting out their career, starting off a business, and I say, well, what's your why? Why are you doing this? And they don't have life event type whys yet, but sometimes the way I get it across to them is that you're just looking to invest and grow money and make sure we're stable and secure, because you want to live above the standard of living line. So the standard of living line in this country, the way I sometimes describe it, is that if you go out to the pub and you buy a pint of beer, it's going to cost you a £5. Now, the same value you have in that pint of beer that costs £5, we have money and structures in place where that same £5 to use £50. So you can spend £50 how most people spend £5. So we're living above a standard of living line. However, to get to that point, and you touched on it about discipline, when you get to a point where you've got investments and you've got your retirement planning, everything's in place, and we're earning money through business and investing, that's getting us to the point where actually £50 to us is £5 to most people. You don't spend £50 like it's a fiver, because you're now disciplined. To get to that level and to go through the trials and tribulations to get your financial plan and your finances to that level, you don't actually spend it like that. Mm-hmm. But some people's goal is just to live at that level. Just, if I need to spend money, I've got extra money there, like you say, it's kind of, some people call it, fuck off money. I've got money there that if somebody wants me to come and do something, I can tell them to fuck off if I want. Because I don't need to do it. Mm-hmm. But living at that, just above the line of society, usually gives people what you would then maybe describe more of financial freedom. Mm-hmm.
And if you were to look at some great books or people to now learn from that would actually now allow them the opportunity to be able to start to explore this in more depth and more detail, what are some of the resources or things that you've read, listened to that you think could be incredibly powerful?
Yeah, some great books out there, I think, again, that either changed my mindset slightly when it comes to money, finances, investing, or confirmed what my mindset was. Got right, okay, it's saying it in this book, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. So great, I'm going to push forward with that. So there's a couple of books. A great one that I read, it was a while ago now, but I'm sure you actually put me onto it, was the Psychology of Money.
Yeah,
which is a fantastic book because it's broken down into simple language and it's really easy to understand. Other books to do with finances that are more story-like, but again, great starting off is what's the one, the Babylon, The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah.
And again, another great book when it comes to that. For me, a big one when we're talking about where your mindset of money comes from and the value, your highest values, and aligning money to your highest values. So instead of doing the just eat, you're putting it, The Values Factor by John DeMartini. Talks about your highest values and living life to your highest values. That was a great book. And what other ones were good? A little bit left field here, but for me, I loved, because again, it talked about the history of the world and humans, and again, where we came from, was Sapiens. Mm-hmm. Sapiens was a good book. Again, when it comes to money as well, why we do certain things with money, because it keeps us safe and secure, or it keeps us, and you get a lot of those concepts from that book as well. So I think it's great to read just money books, but I think you need to have a bit of a blended approach.
Yeah, I think everybody should read. Actually, Aaron, I gave you The Psychology. I was looking for it then, but I gave you The Psychology of Money because I think it's great. The one thing that I took from that was the story about the janitor who was actually a multi-millionaire, but was just because of the way in which he had now kind of saved. The second one was the multi-millionaire that basically wanted to become even more wealthy, and therefore made decisions that were so risky that actually ended up in him now losing absolutely everything, because even though he had more money than he could ever need, it was it wasn't enough because he was chasing that next thing, based upon obviously ego beliefs. And then the other thing that I love was numbers on a screen aren't just numbers on a screen when you then put a human emotion into that, because then numbers on a screen become completely different based upon obviously your beliefs, your assumptions, what it is that you now have in terms of that relationship with obviously those numbers, which massively impacts the way in which you obviously behave and then also spend. And then other one for me that you put me onto was actually YouTube, Ray Dalio, How the Economy Works. I think that's incredible. And again, this comes back down to one thing, and you said this at the start, which is the education side of things. And I think so often, again, I'll speak for myself, is you just brush it under the carpet because you don't understand it, and or you don't feel as though you have necessarily not even me, I would say for me, it's I just love coaching. Let me just spend all my time coaching. It's actually the more you can start to have these conversations, and the more you can now start to gain a level of awareness and start to put these basic principles in place, and you can start to challenge the potential beliefs that you now obviously have from kind of upbringing, etc. Then I think the more powerful you're going to be in terms of then obviously your behaviors and the decisions you then make, and then also how that then aligns to the business decisions you then make in terms of what you're now going to do, what you're not going to do, because as you build, develop and grow as a fitness professional especially, you're then starting to understand, well, right now, okay, this is my top line revenue, but I've now got to consider tax, I've now got to consider VAT, I've now got to consider, right, okay, I need to forecast, I've got to now think about the other expenses that I now have on a day-to-day, on a weekly basis. Well, okay, have I now got enough to be able to invest in this person or this thing or this program or this course, or what does that now look like for me, and how can I now start to budget and be more strategic so that you feel more in control and more aware, and you can be more proactive rather than reactive, because you've got a greater degree of understanding, which I think is so powerful in comparison to being like, I don't know what's going in, what's coming out. I don't know what I'm spending, what I'm not spending, what money's mine, what money isn't mine, etc. And I think it's just that making it a priority and making it something that is so integral and so important if you now want to be able to not just kind of like be a great coach, but then actually run a business. It's about that, such a huge component of that, because that's going to be such an influential driver behind then your decisions and choices you then make and take, both in terms of a business perspective, but then also in on a personal level as well.
I also think, like you said about the psychology of money, and one of the other things I took out of that book is the chapter when it describes where people's mindset comes from. And I had a good meeting with a client yesterday, Friday there, and I think a big thing is the information you've been getting fed from parents and grandparents. And I think the way they described it in that book at the time is that a lot of our parents just now grew up in the 70s and 80s when, you know, interest rates were so high, mortgages were way more expensive than they are just now, and you had to be really careful with your money. And I think a lot of people get that from parents, whereas when we've grown up, probably, you know, our age type thing, just after or around the financial crisis was when we were probably getting into jobs and businesses and stuff like that. Money was extremely cheap. You know, it was easy to get money, it was easy to get mortgages, it was easy to do these things. So we've grown up with a mindset, probably in our generation, more that it's you just spend it willy-nilly, you know, and that it doesn't matter if you take out a loan because it's, you know, 0% interest or 1%, but it's easy. Whereas now we're starting to realise, actually, wait, mortgages are going up, and it's nowhere near where our parents were in the 70s and 80s, but we're having to change the way our behaviours around money, I think, now, people in our generation. And I think that's a big thing to get over as well. It's just where it's came from and why we've got that mindset. And again, going back to budgeting, I think, because I don't think I really answered that question, but in terms of budgeting, in terms of a kind of blanket approach, I always tell clients to use what I call a kind of percentage pot strategy, where you've however much you're bringing in, there should be a percentage of each of this pot going to certain things. I think you mentioned about
profit first is. This is quite a good book. I would just take it with a pinch of salt, but because obviously there's components in there that may not apply right now, but really good book in terms of like percentages from a business perspective, understanding how and what and where you need to kind of like segment, definitely.
And I think a big thing, like you were saying before though, is how do I budget, right? Well, use your income as a percentage, but then it's again going back to that clarity and understanding of percentage of what? Like, what do I need to put back? And right, okay, I need to put tax to the side if I'm running a business. Okay, I get that. I need to put, you know, money to live aside. But what else? Like, what else am I putting aside? You know, we don't know about investing or retirement or all these different things. And again, some people will go, well, fuck retirement. Like, why am I putting 20% of my income to a retirement pot now in my 20s when I can take that 20% and spend it and live a bit more? But then again, it's going back to then having these conversations around, well, what happens when you retire? And it's about making people understand the position they're in. You know, for instance, like a lot of the guys in your industry, and to be fair, a lot of industries, it's that conversation of what happens when we get to 55, 60. Do you sell your business? Do you keep your business? Do you give it to the next generation? How does it work? So what will retirement look like? And I never thought of that. Well, let's have the conversation now to at least start the planning process, and also then to make you aware of why you're putting 20% aside for the later life things. And I think when you get that clarity and understanding of your situation, you know, some of these books are great for that, kind of where your mindset, money's around, it makes budgeting easier and better and more powerful, and you know why you're doing it now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing.
The amount of conversations that I've had with so many of our coaches who have now obviously had a conversation with you and or just taken ownership in terms of actually being able to look at where they are right now. I think sometimes it's that avoidance because you don't want to look at where you are right now because you almost don't want to face the facts. But actually, so often they look at things that it's 9 times out of 10 not as bad as they think it was, and or they actually then feel significantly better because they now take control. And they're now in a position where they are in the driving seat because they've now got the awareness of the position they're currently in, which then gives them more stability and more security and more safety. Why is it you feel or believe, based upon your opinion, that this has almost been quite a subject? I think it's being brought around to the awareness, it's been brought to the surface so much more, and it's been brought to kind of a greater degree of awareness. But why do you think it's been such a taboo subject, and or like people don't necessarily really talk about it as much, and or the importance of that maybe as much as they should?
Yeah, I think it's potentially a British thing. I think it's a British culture thing. You don't talk about money, and you keep your money to yours, to you, and you don't ask about other people's money, and money's bad, and I think generationally it's been more of a British thing, because I think anytime we've been over at the States and America and that, they're not as, I'm just using America as an example, as closed off about finances and money a bit more. So I think it's potentially a bit of a British thing. But also I think, like you say, a lot of our mindset around money comes from what we hear. So it comes from parents, it comes from grandparents, and these types of things. So I think it's something that needs, at least from my point of view, needs to be talked about, because the more you're open, I don't want to go into specifics with people in the pub type thing, but the more you're aware of your finances, and again, a lot of the way I describe it with some clients when they come out of meetings is it's like I've took my head out of the sand now, and I understand, like you say, I've been avoiding it for so long, not looking at it and just spending out of emotions instead of any sort of strategy. Now that we've had this conversation, I can bring my head up out of the sand, and I understand there's a clear plan now, and I think that's what a lot of people get out of it. And again, I think it's just opening up those conversations around your money, and there's nothing wrong with it, Unfortunately, we all know how to make it, but unfortunately, none of us are taking it to the grave.
Yeah.
So I think we need to have that a wee bit of understanding around what's going on, and not having too much of a tight grip on what's going on with our money type of thing.
I think it's just playing a longer term game, like long term games with longer term people, whether that's now with your body shape, health and performance, whether that's now in a relationship or relationships, whether that's now with like your financial management. Everything is just about just trying to understand what are the behaviors that I now want to embody, that I now know that my future self will thank my current self for, because ultimately your current situation is a reflection on your previous behaviors, not your current behaviors. So right now it's an understanding, how do I want my future to look, and then what do my current behaviors need to look like in order for me to now be able to work towards said target and said goal. And I think that's the really, really powerful thing, is if you can raise awareness around, right, okay, well, what do I now, what's the position, what do I really want, where do I want to be, why is that now important to me? Right, okay, that now looks like A, B, and C. Well, then as a byproduct, you can then start to understand, well, what are the behaviors and what are the strategies, and then what are the tactics that I can then start to put in place, most importantly. And again, like, I think one big belief that I had was like, oh, I needed to have X amount of money, or I needed to wait until I got to X level, or I needed to get to this point in order for me to now be to start doing this. But you can start at the, like, let's say I'll use Joe as an example. Just as he was starting this coaching thing, I could have started then, but I didn't, because I had the belief that I wasn't in a position to do so. But upon reflection, and I'll let you take the lead on this, like, how different could that now be, and or how important is it actually maybe for people from the get-go to have?
I think the big thing as well when I talk to people is that they think, like you say, it definitely is that kind of taboo of that they need to have X amount before they can invest, or they need to have X amount before they can talk to a financial professional or advisor. And it's really not. It's investing, if anything, is little and often type thing, or could be. You can put in whatever you can. Now, if you've got 20-30% of your budget that's towards that, and that's £60-100 a month, and get it in, because again, a big thing about the investing side of things, it's a compound effect. It compounds and grows year on year, month on month. So I think, well, a lot of these types of things, it's just start. Don't get me wrong, don't just go in blind and not know what you're doing and put it in as something that's crazy high risk or whatever, but talk to somebody that kind of knows what they're talking about and just start. It can be a very simple direct debit setup, into your investments and pensions or whatever else. Again, talking looking more at the property side of things. It's not as, and I think that was a big thing why I not changed from property to wealth management, but I went into wealth management as a full-time career, is that I found that obviously with property and that as an asset class, you do need a bit of funds behind you to invest. You know, you can't invest with £100 a month. It's not if you're doing it in terms of buying the property yourself. Whereas I knew that there was so many people out there that just needed a wee bit more understanding, clarity around their finances, and would want to invest the £100 a month into something that's growing, but they have nobody to talk to about that. Mm-hmm. So I think it was moving away from just speaking to people that are either in the property space or would like to get into it, to kind of talking to the wider public. They should just be putting some money away in general.
Yeah, making it more accessible and not just in one singular domain. Aaron, what questions? Do you have any questions, mate? The QM, the real QM. We call Troy the QM, but Aaron, the man behind the camera, is actually the real QM.
To be honest, that was. I had a list of questions before we started on my head, anyways, and you've gone through quite a lot, which has been class. But one would be just exactly what you're talking about, that point there, in terms of, can you go into that a little bit more in terms of what kind of things could you be looking at? Because I often think that could be like a barrier. People coming out of school and things like that, and they're like, okay, I can invest in property, and that's like a good kind of route to go down. But then those kind of more accessible, shorter budgets, monthly, what kind of things could you look at in that domain?
So yeah, I think in general, first and foremost, getting over that, what is investing and how do we do it? So straight away you invest in assets. So, and there's different types of assets. You know, you've got lower risk and higher risk assets. You know, lower risk is, you know, cash. You know, it's easily accessible. We can all get the hole in the wall and pull our cash out. It's pretty safe, but it's not going to make us much money. So we're not going to get a return on our cash. The next asset I would say in terms of a risk scale that's just up from cash is what we call bonds. So bonds are loans to the government or loans to big companies, but you can invest in bonds. The way it works is you'll loan, let's just say, the government X amount of money. In return they give you a bond. They'll then use your money to fix the roads, unemployment schemes, all the things that the government would use it for. And the deal is they'll give you your money back in 5 years' time, and they'll give you 2% for borrowing your money. So it's still pretty low risk, low reward. It's low risk because it's very unlikely the government's going to go bust. So they're a pretty safe institution. We then move up the risk scale with a different asset, stocks and shares, which a lot of people know about. You know, as an asset class, we call them equities. So you can invest in equities, stocks and shares, a little bit of a company. More higher risk because, you know, companies can go bust, you know, financial news can come out that can destroy reputation, stocks go down. But they can also do the opposite and go up quite heavily and highly. There's alternative investments, so commodities like gold, silver, whiskey, all these types of things you can invest in. But we invest in these assets. Now, a lot of people will then go, oh yeah, I want to do the ISA thing. And I think getting over there, again, a bit of education, understanding around what an ISA, what a pension is. All they are is what we call tax wrappers. Because a big thing about investing and making money is, you know, potentially depending on how much you're making or investing, you're paying a lot in tax. You know, in our country we're heavily taxed, nearly 50% in Scotland if you're in the higher rate tax bracket. So what these wrappers do, ISAs and pensions, is we wrap around the assets that we've invested in, depending on our risk, and it shields us from tax. So like how you would go out into the outside and pouring down the rain, you'd put a jacket on to shield you from the rain. All an ISA and a pension is shielding your assets from tax. Now, when we think about that, that's the things that we would invest in. The rules of the ISA game is you invest tax-free growth, so it grows tax-free. Whatever your pot's at the end of when you want it, it's yours to take, and there's no more tax to pay. So it's very tax efficient. The rule with that is you can take it whenever you want. You know, so if you're investing for 5-10 years, and at the end of the 10 years you want a bit of that money because it's growing, you can do it. Pension's slightly different. There's a lot more tax relief and what we call getting your tax back, which is a really good way. Or if you're doing it through a limited company, you just don't pay tax. It's an expense if you put money into your pension. So it's very tax efficient. But the rule to that game is you can't touch it till you're older. You've got to be in your 50s, close to 60s before you can get it. So you're still investing in the assets, but we just wrap these little things around them. When it comes to property, as another asset class that sits by itself, there's no tax wrapper around it. You can't put it in a tax wrapper. So, unfortunately with property, it's heavily taxed. You're taxed on the way in, you're taxed during it because it goes onto your income, and then you're taxed on the way out. You're actually taxed on the way out heavier than any other asset that you would sell to make a profit. So I think when it comes to the investing side of things, it's having a blended approach. But if you don't have the big chunky deposit and money for the property, plus all the extra tax that you need to buy it, we would look at the ISA and we would look at the pension as well. And again, going back to that diversified blended approach, you can use these structures throughout your life depending on how you want to access your money. You know? So I think just, and again with let's just say your ISA, you know, you can put £100 in a month, put £50 in a month. You can, you know, put it in a direct debit type thing, £150, and then in another month if you need a little extra money for something else, you can pull it down to 100. So it's not, I think some people think when they start investing as well, they're stuck to that amount that they're investing in or how much they're committing to it a month. You know, it can be flexible. But a big thing around the investment is you don't want to just be pulling it out willy-nilly, because the whole point of investing is you're wanting to grow your money. You know, so I think that's a big thing.
The other big thing that I would just say is, like, as an asset class, is just you as a person, as a human, as an individual. So if you think about it through that domain as well, it's like fundamentally the most important person that's now going to be the driving force, which is, like, say, the magic money making machine that you said sat on the coffee table, is actually just your skill. Mm-hmm. You know, and actually now understanding, like, you as an individual, it's like the better you are, the more skills that you have, the more that you now have in terms of capability to now be able to solve problems and or to support and or to like provide to certain problems and or the world. Like, the better you're now going to get kind of rewarded as a byproduct of that. So it's also now looking at it is like you've obviously got these kind of other things externally, but then also then look at you internally, because ultimately, like, you are then the machine as well, which is also another powerful thing. I think sometimes people think it's that external, but then also consider that it's like you are the greatest asset that you now own fundamentally, and the better you are, whether that's now going to be health, wealth, relationships, skills that you now have, fundamentally the more opportunity you then can create, because the greater degree of problem you have the power and the ability to solve, or whatever it might potentially be. So I think it's also looking at it through that kind of lens as well, which is so powerful.
I think as well, when it comes to investing, which some people these days don't, when you're talking about you being the asset and the emotions that come across when we're investing or we're putting together a financial plan, is actually to adopt a certain level of patience. I think these days everything's so fast and quick and you want things now, and is actually and like I go back to what I said at the start, what we're trying to create here is long-term sustainable wealth. So we use a blended approach, different structures and tax wrappers and investing, but then we also need to have that little bit of patience to sit and let it do its thing over the years. Mm-hmm. And I think, like you say, sometimes these days we're so quick to try and make fast cash or make money, or that we actually don't just sit and let it do its thing. And again, probably one of the biggest investors, most successful, Warren Buffett, is kind of what he's done. He's just put his money into certain assets and certain companies, and he's just sat and waited.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that compound effect grows.
Yeah, I think again it goes, it's behavior, delayed gratification, discipline, and then financial just education and awareness more so than anything else are like absolutely key. And again, it's the behavior element and component which is essential. So if you could now leave individuals from this podcast with a couple of like golden nuggets and or action steps that you would believe that they would benefit from taking, first and foremost, what would be the kind of 1, 2, 3s that you'd maybe give them in terms of the first steps that they could take to raise awareness around this stuff moving forward, for them to be able to take more control and gain more education and awareness?
I think the biggest, and we've not touched on it yet, but one of the big things you can do kind of now, just to get more first, because again, first and foremost, if you're wanting to put a financial plan in place or you're wanting to get better with your finances, there's a reason behind it. There's a reason you've reached out to me, or we're having a meeting or whatever else. But I think one of the big things you can do just to get a little bit more clarity around your situation is review your bank accounts. You know, review your statements. See what your spending behaviours are. See what your financial habits are. you know. And I think one of the big things I did back in the day was every month or two I would just print off a couple of my bank statements and just highlight in green and red all the things I was spending on. And I very quickly seen how much rubbish I was spending on certain things, and even little things like how much these days, I suppose, how much you spend on coffee every day, you know, and how much that's grown up. Now then, if you've had a conversation with someone like myself and you've got the values and the reasons why we're wanting to invest and put a plan in place, that £100 that goes to coffee every month, you go, bloody hell, that's what a waste that is, when I can take £50 of that, you know, maybe spend, you know, half your coffee intake a month, and the other £50 goes into investing. And because you then have an understanding around what it is, you see it growing. You can see it growing just from a slight behaviour change, a slight habit change on what you're doing. But I think to start that process of whatever you want to do financial wise, to review what your finances are doing and what you are doing with them, I think is probably step number one.
And then what would be step number two in your mind?
Well, once you've reviewed your finances, you've got a bit more clarity and understanding on your spending behaviours and patterns. It's then about looking at, first and foremost, the security aspect. So how do I make sure that myself, my finances, my family, you know, the people that are in my circle are secure? Yes, where your emergency fund comes in place. That's where these little structures to put to the side. Again, when we're looking at things like emergency funds, a lot of people don't change their bank accounts necessarily. You keep the same bank account you've had for years. But actually going on some of these websites, I think, you know, the money, was it Martin Lewis guys, pretty good just to see, especially these days with interest rates going up, what bank accounts you're going to get slightly more money back from in interest. So have high interest bank accounts where you've put this little money to the side. You're not making loads, but you're making a bit. We're not investing this money, we're not doing anything with it. That's your security money, your safety money. So at least put it in a structure that's going to get something back from it. Then it's probably looking at your income, your expenses, your like I say, spending habits and patterns, and seeing what money we can allocate budget-wise, percentage pots into different things. And I think, I can't remember what the phrase you used there about before, during or later life.
Yeah, so live life, love life, later life.
Yeah, like that's a great way to look at it in terms of what you're budgeting and what you're putting into certain things.
Yeah.
And again, I think as well, the next thing you would do is either get a understanding of what investing is and why you would do it, or come and speak to someone that can kind of educate you on what it is. Once you get that clear understanding, you know why you're doing these certain things. So I think, yeah, just reviewing your finances, putting money away that's safe, and then once you've got the survival part, you start doing the thriving part. And make sure that every life event, you know, every 10 year, whatever, there's a plan in place for these stages of life.
Yeah.
I think would be good. And if you do that, you're, in terms of financial planning, you've got a pretty robust financial plan.
Superb. And if anybody wants to have a chat with you or explore and find out a little bit more about where Quinny is, what he's up to, and how he can potentially help, where's best to go?
It's probably social media, so Instagram, Ryan Quinn Wealth Management, LinkedIn, put some stuff up on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, so that's probably the best way to find me. Again, in terms of the way it works with financial advice and what I do is any chats, and I think that's a big thing we've maybe not explored a wee bit, but a barrier to financial advice is a lot of people think it costs a lot of money to speak to someone. Chats we have, meetings I have with clients are free. It's not, I don't take any money when I do a meeting with someone. So to just reach out and get a bit more clarity, understanding of your finances, it's not going to cost anything. I think that's a big thing to get over, is making sure there's not these barriers in place and people don't have this stigma of it's going to cost me a lot of money to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, reach out, social media, that's the best way, and then kind of take it from there.
Superb. Mate, thank you so much. I know this is such an important topic that I wanted just to be able to bring to the forefront and bring just to awareness, because again, I think when you get into the coaching world, you're a great coach, and you love coaching, you love macros, and you love training, and you love like helping people do X, Y, and Z, and like supporting them in that domain. But when it actually then comes to even building a business, you're then thinking about, right, okay, what are the systems, what are the strategies, what do I need to do for my marketing and messaging, what do I now need to do in terms of like my product and my offer? But then actually, when you look behind that, it's about actually understanding, well, what is the machine, and that's obviously going to be the financials, and having that education and having that awareness, and just being able to just start by having this conversation and bring it to the forefront. So even off the back of this, if you've listened and you've got to this point and you're thinking, I want to take a step, like even by simply just getting to this point of raising awareness, that will probably allow you the opportunity to be able to understand, well, what are the steps I can now start to put in place, because ultimately that is going to be the very vehicle and the very thing that's going to allow you the opportunity to have more impact. It's going to allow you to opportunity to be able to support you in your future and what you now really want. It's going to allow you to make better quality decisions around actually your vision and what you now see, and how you can now start to strategically invest, whether that's now in you, whether that's now in the business, or whether that's now in your future. And then also I think as well, like being able to just now take a more of a strategic view in terms of, this is now where I am, I've got a plan, I've got a strategy, I've got a level of education and awareness and degree of clarity. And actually in doing so, that will give you so much more confidence and certainty, and also this understanding of, can I now challenge the potential beliefs that I have surrounding money that I've grown up with, that I've been exposed to, that now may allow me the opportunity to think and see differently. So dude, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And mate, I'm looking forward to another episode soon.
Perfect. Thanks very much.